Hi everyone and welcome to this video, the next in my series on speech writing. So far we've looked at 9 different techniques that we can use to make a speech really stand out, and there are links to the first 3 videos in the description below if you need them. In this video I want to look at 2 more devices that can be incredibly persuasive and powerful, starting with the idea of the counter-argument. A counter-argument is a point or an argument made against or to counter another idea. So often when you are trying to persuade someone of something, they're actually spending all that time that you're talking thinking through all the reasons that you're wrong. For example, imagine that you're trying to persuade a group of parents and teachers that students should be allowed to leave school at lunchtime. Most of those listening will already have made up their minds, and while you're talking, they're probably thinking of all the reasons why students shouldn't be allowed to leave at lunchtime. A counter-argument acknowledges the opposition, but then diffuses it by arguing for an alternative. So for example, imagine you're saying, "It's time to treat the students of this school with respect and dignity. It's time to treat the students of this school with humanity and kindness. It's time to let the students of this school out for lunch." Most adults would be thinking of the students who might get into trouble, or even the students that if allowed out mightn't come back. So a counter-argument here would have to acknowledge all of that. So for example, you could say, "Now I know what some of you are thinking right this moment. You're thinking about the students who need to be supervised. You're thinking about students getting into trouble. I understand that, but how can you learn to trust us if you don't give us a chance to earn that trust? Many of us come to school on our own without supervision, and we go home at the end of the day without supervision. What's so different about lunchtime?" So a well-placed counter-argument will take the heat out of a hostile audience, but it also addresses their concern. It shows you're aware of the issues surrounding what you're talking about, and it can be really persuasive. Generally, the counter-argument comes towards the end of your speech. After you've laid out most of what you think, you use your counter-argument almost like a hammer blow to remove all of the arguments listeners may have in their heads while listening to you speak. The next idea I want to look at is something called antithesis. This is a way of matching, contrasting, or balancing sentences for emphasis. You take an idea and contrast it with something that has gone immediately before it. For example, "This is not a tragedy, it's an opportunity." Or, "This is not the end, it's the beginning." Some really famous examples would be Martin Luther King's, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character." Or Neil Armstrong, "Okay, I'm going to step off the LEM now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." So you see the contrast between the small step and the giant leap in that one. And in the Martin Luther King example, what they won't be judged by and what they will be judged by. The difference between the colour of their skin and the content of their character. Antithesis is really useful at highlighting ideas. Just like if you put 2 contrasting colours together to make one stand out, putting 2 contrasting ideas together usually makes the second idea stand out even more. Another way that you can use antithesis for very strong emphasis is to mislead your audience. For example, if we were to say, "Homelessness is not a bad thing," then that would sound odd or strange even. Most people would agree that homelessness is a bad thing, especially if you say it in a speech where you're arguing against homelessness. But if you were to say, "Homelessness is not a bad thing, it's a terrible thing," you're misleading your audience, and then the emphasis is on the second part of that sentence. It's not bad, it's terrible. Finally, I want to look at the structure of a speech. So in this series, we've looked at 11 different techniques now that you could use, sort of like a toolbox, to make your speech really impressive. You don't need to use all of them, and you should always be careful not to overuse any of them. But how you structure them ultimately is up to you. I'm going to give you a suggested outline of how I might use these devices in a speech if I were writing it. So I would aim to write 6 paragraphs and divide my devices up as follows. First paragraph, I would introduce my ideas, what I'm talking about, and I would try to use anaphora and finish that paragraph with direct address in a question. My second paragraph, I would use expert opinion to give my ideas authority and to show that it's not just me who thinks these things. My third paragraph, I try to use some statistics to back up my next point or idea. And then my fourth paragraph, I would move from statistics to an anecdote, so I can use some emotive language and connect with my listeners. And I can also show them that whatever it is that I'm talking about affects real people. It's not just statistics and numbers. My fifth paragraph, I'd use my counter-argument. This is to dispel any doubts and to show that I've got awareness of the issues around the topic that I'm talking about. My sixth paragraph, I would use collective pronouns and I'd call for something to change. I'd finish on a strong note and I'd try to use antithesis right at the end. There are many ways to use these devices and no way is right or wrong. Just remember not to overuse any one in particular. And also, finally, remember that your ideas are just as important as the devices you use to communicate them. So make sure you are knowledgeable about what it is you're going to talk about in your speech and that you have some good vocabulary that you can use as well. I hope that this series has been useful for you in writing speeches, planning for speaking and listening assessments, or just to help to make your writing that bit more impressive. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to comment, don't forget to like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you soon.